Get your black ass out of my seat, boy. Lydia Caldwell's manicured nails dug into Darius Montgomery's shoulder as she yanked him upward. His coffee spilled across the Wall Street Journal. Hot liquid splashed his jeans. She shoved him into the aisle and dropped into seat 1A like she was conquering territory. That's better. Lydia smoothed her Chanel skirt, claiming his armrest. Some people forget where they belong. Darius stood hunched under the low cabin ceiling. His plain hoodie and faded jeans screamed economy class. Her diamond bracelet caught the first-class lighting as she adjusted herself in his warm leather seat. Phones lifted around them. A teenager went live on TikTok. 200 passengers watched a theft in real time. Darius gripped his boarding pass. The ink on 1A was smudged but visible. Have you ever watched evil win while everyone just stood there? Justice was coming. Flight doors closing in 10 minutes. All passengers must be seated. Flight attendant Brooke Callahan rushed toward the commotion, her blonde ponytail bouncing. She spotted Lydia settled comfortably in 1A and Darius standing awkwardly in the aisle. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry about this disruption." Brooke's voice dripped sympathy as she touched Lydia's shoulder. "Are you okay?" Darius stepped forward, boarding pass extended. "This is my assigned seat, 1A." Brooke barely glanced at the paper. Her eyes swept over his hoodie, his scuffed sneakers, his dark skin. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Economy class is toward the back of the aircraft." Finally, Lydia sighed dramatically. "Someone with common sense." Darius kept his voice level. "Could you please look at my boarding pass?" "Sir, please don't make this more difficult." Brooke positioned herself between Darius and the seat. "I'm sure your actual seat is very comfortable." Behind them, passengers whispered. Phones emerged from pockets. A teenager named Taylor Grayson opened TikTok and hit record. "I don't understand the confusion," Darius said quietly. "My ticket clearly shows." "Look at him," Lydia interrupted, gesturing dismissively. "Does he look like he belongs in first class? I'm Diamond Medallion status. I've been flying Delta for 15 years. Brooke nodded knowingly. "Of course, ma'am. We appreciate your loyalty." "I have the same loyalty program status," Darius offered. "If you could just verify." "Sir, I don't have time for games." Brooke's tone sharpened. "Now, please find your correct seat so we can depart on time." Taylor's livestream counter climbed. 500 viewers, 800, 1,200. Comments flooded the screen. "This is discrimination. Why won't she look at his ticket?" "Call the supervisor." Darius pulled out his phone. The screen showed multiple missed calls and text messages. One read, "Board meeting moved to 4 p.m. Where are you?" "Putting on quite a show, aren't you?" Lydia smirked, pretending to be important. Brooke noticed Darius's expensive-looking phone but dismissed it. "Sir, final warning. Move to your assigned seat or I'll need to call security." "I am in my assigned seat," Darius repeated calmly. "No, you're not." Brooke's voice rose. "This is first class. You're clearly in the economy." The assumption hung in the air like poison. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some filmed openly now. Darius glanced at his leather briefcase in the overhead bin. His initials DM were embossed in gold. The briefcase cost more than most people's monthly rent, but Brooke's eyes never traveled upward. "Ma'am," an elderly passenger called out. "Maybe you should check his ticket." "Thank you, but I can handle this," Brooke snapped back. Lydia examined her manicured nails. "I can't believe this is even a discussion. Look at us. Look at him. It's obvious who belongs where." Darius's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His breathing remained steady, controlled. Years of meditation and executive training kept his composure intact. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Brooke turned to Lydia. "Ma'am, I apologize for this delay. We'll have this resolved immediately." She pressed the call button for the purser. "Victor, I need assistance in first class. We have a passenger in the wrong seat who won't comply." Darius watched the interaction with clinical interest. Every word, every gesture was being recorded by multiple devices. The documentation was perfect. Taylor's stream had reached 3,000 viewers. Her whispered commentary captured everything. The flight attendant won't even look at his boarding pass. This is insane. "I've seen this before," Lydia announced to nearby passengers. "They get one credit card, buy one expensive item, and think they can fool everyone." She gestured at Darius's clothes. "Designer hoodie, please. Probably bought at an outlet mall." Darius said nothing. His silence seemed to irritate Lydia more than arguments would have. "At least say something," she taunted. "Defend yourself unless you know you're wrong." The purser's footsteps approached from behind. Victor Langston, 8-year Delta veteran, carried himself with practiced authority. His eyes immediately assessed the situation. Well-dressed white woman in first class, casually dressed black man standing in the aisle. The math was simple in his mind. What seems to be the problem here? Victor's voice carried the weight of policy and procedure. This passenger, Brooke emphasized the word like an accusation, refuses to move to his assigned seat. He's disrupting our departure schedule. Victor didn't ask to see Darius's ticket, didn't ask for his name or confirmation number. His assumption was instant and complete. Sir, you need to find your correct seat immediately. We have a schedule to maintain. Darius extended his boarding pass again. I am in my correct seat. This is my documentation. Victor barely glanced at the paper. Sir, I don't have time for fake documents or games. Move to economy now or I'll call airport security. The threat landed like a slap. Several passengers gasped. Taylor's viewer count jumped to 5,000. Darius looked around the cabin. Every face told the same story. They saw his skin color, his clothes, and made their judgment. The boarding pass in his hand might as well have been invisible. Perfect, Lydia said, settling deeper into the seat. I have a connecting flight in New York. I can't afford delays because of this nonsense. Darius nodded slowly as if coming to a decision. He pulled out his phone and opened an app. The loading screen showed a Delta Airlines logo. What's he doing now? Brooke muttered to Victor. Probably calling someone to complain. Victor replied dismissively. They always do. Darius's thumb moved across the screen, navigating through menus with practiced efficiency. His expression remained calm, almost serene. The storm was about to break. We have a code yellow in first class. Victor spoke into his radio, requesting additional crew support. Within seconds, 2 more flight attendants appeared. Colton Reeves, 25, fresh-faced and eager to impress. Sofia Delgado, 40, a veteran with tired eyes and zero patience for disruptions. What's the situation? Sofia asked, crossing her arms as she looked Darius up and down. The passenger refuses to move to economy, Brooke explained. Won't accept that he's in the wrong seat. Colton positioned himself behind Darius, blocking any retreat. Sir, we really need you to cooperate here. 4 crew members now formed a semicircle around Darius in the narrow aisle. Lydia watched from her stolen throne, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. This is embarrassing, she announced loudly. I'm trying to get to an important business meeting and this man is holding up the entire flight with his delusions. Darius remained calm, his phone still in his hand. The Delta app was open, but the screen wasn't visible to the crew. The captain's voice cut through the tension. Crew, please prepare for pushback. You hear that? Victor's voice hardened. You're delaying 200 passengers because you can't accept reality. Yeah, Colton added, emboldened by the group dynamic. Just take your real seat and we can all move on. Sofia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Listen carefully. Move to economy now or airport security will remove you in handcuffs. Your choice. The threat of handcuffs sent a ripple through the cabin. More phones appeared. Taylor's TikTok stream had exploded to 15,000 viewers. Comments flying faster than she could read them. Call the police. This is 2025. Sue them all. Hashtag Delta Racism. Lydia basked in the attention. I've never seen such entitled behavior. Some people think the rules don't apply to them. She turned to address the filming passengers. You're all witnesses to this disruption. I tried to handle this quietly, but he just won't listen to reason. A businessman in seat 2C lowered his laptop. Excuse me, but shouldn't you at least look at his boarding pass before— Sir, please don't interfere. Victor cut him off sharply. We're handling this professionally. Professionally? The businessman's eyebrows rose. You haven't even verified his ticket. Sofia whirled around. Are you questioning our procedures? I'm questioning why you won't look at a piece of paper. The man replied evenly. Brooke's face flushed. We don't need to examine obvious forgeries. How do you know it's forged if you haven't looked? Asked an elderly woman in 1B. The crew was losing control of the narrative. Passengers were turning against them and the phones kept recording. Look at him. Lydia stood up from the seat, gesturing wildly. Use your eyes. Does anything about this man scream first-class passenger to you? She pointed at Darius's hoodie. That's a $30 sweatshirt from Target. I can tell the quality when I see it. Darius glanced down at his clothing, then back at Lydia with mild curiosity. How can you determine the price of my clothes? Because I know it's cheap when I see it, Lydia snapped. Your shoes are probably from Payless. Your jeans look like they came from Walmart. Ma'am is absolutely right. Colton nodded eagerly. First-class passengers have certain presentation standards. Sofia crossed her arms. We're trained to identify passengers who might be out of place. It's about maintaining the premium experience for legitimate customers. Darius's phone buzzed with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, emails marked urgent. One message preview was visible. Board meeting moved to 4 p.m. Lydia spotted it and laughed. Oh, look, he's got someone texting him about a board meeting. How cute. Probably his supervisor at McDonald's. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably at the cruelty, but the crew seemed energized by Lydia's confidence. Sir, Victor's patience had evaporated. This is your final warning. Security is already on their way up the jet bridge. Actually, Darius said quietly, I'd like them to see this. His calm response seemed to unnerve the crew. They'd expected anger, arguments, threats of lawsuits. Instead, he stood there like he was collecting evidence. See what? Brooks snapped. Are you making a fool of yourself? Him proving he doesn't belong here? Lydia added with a laugh. Look at him. Really look. Does anything about this man say first class to you? She gestured dramatically at his appearance. The shoes alone tell the whole story. Those aren't first-class shoes. A teenage passenger whispered loudly, This is so messed up. They're being totally racist. Colton spun around. Excuse me? We're following standard protocols here. This has nothing to do with race. Then why won't you look at his ticket? The teenager shot back. Because we can tell when someone's lying, Sophia replied coldly. It's called experience. Darius glanced down at his comfortable walking shoes, then back at Lydia. Still no anger in his expression. If anything, he looked satisfied. Ma'am has a point, Sophia said. First-class passengers dress appropriately. They understand the environment they're entering. Exactly. Colton nodded eagerly. It's about respect. Respect for the airline, respect for other passengers, respect for the premium experience. Taylor whispered to her live stream. This is the most racist thing I've ever seen in person. They won't even look at his ticket. Her viewer count hit 25,000. The hashtag Delta discrimination was starting to trend on Twitter. Victor keyed his radio again. Security, what's your ETA to gate A12? 2 minutes out, came the crackling response. Perfect. Lydia clapped her hands together. Finally, some professional handling of this situation. She looked directly at Darius. I hope you're happy with yourself. Now everyone on this plane knows exactly what kind of person you are. Darius tilted his head slightly. What kind of person am I? The question caught Lydia off guard. She'd expected denial, not curiosity. You're the kind who lies, she said, regaining her composure. Who tries to take what isn't yours? Who thinks you can fool people with fake documents and sob stories? I haven't told any stories, Darius observed quietly. Your whole presence here is a story, Lydia shot back. A fantasy where you belong in first class. Well, reality is about to knock. The crew nodded in agreement. They'd created a unified narrative. Darius was a fraud. They were the heroes maintaining order. Heavy footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. 2 airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door, their radios crackling with status updates. There he is. Brooke pointed at Darius like identifying a criminal. The passenger causing the disruption. Officer Brooks, a black man in his 40s, approached with his partner, Officer Park, an Asian woman with kind eyes but firm demeanor. What seems to be the problem here? Officer Brooks asked professionally. Victor launched into his prepared explanation. The passenger refuses to move to his assigned seat. Claims this first-class seat belongs to him despite obvious evidence to the contrary. What obvious evidence? Officer Park asked. The crew exchanged glances. They'd been so confident in their assumptions, they hadn't considered someone might ask for actual proof. Well, Brooks stammered. I mean, look at him. Officer Brooks's expression hardened slightly. Ma'am, I need specific evidence, not observations about appearance. Lydia sensed the crew's hesitation and jumped in. Officers, I've been patient, but this man has been harassing me for 10 minutes. I just want to sit in the seat I paid for. Ma'am, we understand, Officer Brooks replied. Then to Darius. Sir, your boarding pass, please. Darius handed over the crumpled paper. Officer Park examined it carefully, her brow furrowing as she read. The aircraft had gone almost silent except for the hum of electronics and whispered commentary from filming passengers. Officer Park looked at the boarding pass again, then at Darius, then at Lydia, sitting in 1A. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to confusion. This boarding pass says seat 1A, she said slowly. Victor stepped forward desperately. Obviously forged. Look at him. Does he look like he can afford first class? That's not how we determine. Officer Park began, but Lydia cut her off. Please, officer, use common sense here. I'm a Diamond Medallion member. I've been loyal to Delta for 15 years. Why would I lie about my seat? She pulled out her phone showing her Delta app. Look, here's my boarding pass. Seat 1A, first class. Officer Brooks examined Lydia's phone, then looked back at Darius's paper boarding pass. The situation was becoming more complex than a simple seating dispute. Sir, Officer Brooks addressed Darius, can you show us some ID and explain how you obtained this boarding pass? Darius reached slowly into his pocket, his movements deliberate and calm. The entire cabin watched as he withdrew his wallet, but instead of pulling out a driver's license, his fingers moved to a different pocket, to his phone. Actually, Darius said, his voice carrying a new quality, quiet authority that made everyone lean in. I think there's something you all need to see first. The app on his phone had finished loading. The storm was about to break. Darius's thumb moved across his phone screen with practiced precision. The Delta Airlines app interface shifted, revealing layers most passengers never saw. Executive dashboard, CEO portal, employee management system. The screen filled with corporate data, authorization codes, and a header that made Officer Park's breath catch in her throat. Darius Montgomery, Chief Executive Officer. Authority level, Supreme All Access. Employee ID 00000001, Founder, CEO. Direct reports 43,000 employees. Officer Brooks leaned over his partner's shoulder to see the screen. His professional composure cracked for just a moment. Sir, he whispered. The change in the security officer's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. They stepped back slightly, their entire posture shifting from enforcement to deference. Victor noticed the officer's reaction first. What? What are you looking at? Darius held the phone screen toward the purser. Victor's eyes moved across the display, processing each word. His face went from confident authority to confusion to dawning horror in the span of 3 seconds. That can't be. Victor's clipboard slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Brooke leaned in to see what had shocked her supervisor into silence. When the information registered, her face drained of all color. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Colton and Sophia crowded closer, squinting at the screen. The corporate hierarchy was crystal clear. Every person on this aircraft, from the captain to the newest flight attendant, reported ultimately to the man they'd been humiliating for the past 10 minutes. Mr. Montgomery, Officer Brooks said quietly, his voice carrying new respect. We weren't aware of your position. Darius looked at the security officer with calm eyes. Of course you weren't. That was entirely the point. The cabin had gone dead silent except for the hum of electronics and the soft sound of phones recording. Every passenger sensed the dramatic shift in power, though most couldn't see the phone screen. Lydia, still seated in 1A, looked around in confusion. What's everyone staring at? Can we please resolve this and take off? Darius turned the phone screen toward her. Lydia's eyes scanned the display, her expression cycling through disbelief, recognition, and pure terror. You can't be, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I own 67% of this airline, Miss Caldwell. Darius's voice remained calm, but it now carried unmistakable authority. I don't just own seat 1A. I own every seat on this aircraft. The words hit Lydia like a physical blow. She gripped the armrests of the seat, his seat. As the full magnitude of her situation became clear, Victor found his voice, though it trembled. Sir, we had no idea. We were just following standard. Standard what? Darius interrupted gently. Standard procedure is to examine passenger documentation before making assumptions. Standard procedure is to treat every customer with dignity and respect. He looked at each crew member in turn. Instead, you made judgments based on my appearance. You refused to look at my boarding pass. You threatened me with arrest. Brooks' hands were shaking. Mr. Montgomery, I'm so sorry. We made a terrible mistake. You made several terrible mistakes, Darius corrected. But the biggest one was assuming that respect is earned by appearance rather than humanity. Taylor's livestream had exploded to 89,000 viewers. The comment section was moving too fast to read, but the sentiment was clear. Justice was finally coming. Darius checked his watch, not for departure time, but for something else entirely. His calendar showed a reminder that made several passengers gasp when they glimpsed it. Emergency board meeting, discrimination protocol review, 4 p.m. legal department, federal compliance violation report, 4:15 p.m. media relations, press conference prep, 5 p.m. Officer Park realized what she was seeing. Sir, this was planned. Darius nodded slowly. I've been conducting unannounced assessments of our passenger experience protocols. Today's test revealed systematic failures at multiple levels. The crew stood frozen, understanding that they'd walked into a carefully orchestrated evaluation and failed spectacularly. Lydia tried to stand from the seat, but her legs were unsteady. I didn't know. I had no idea. Would it have mattered? Darius asked quietly. If I were just Darius Montgomery, passenger, instead of Darius Montgomery, CEO, would that justify your behavior? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Lydia had no answer because they both knew the truth. Miss Caldwell, Darius continued, you're currently sitting in seat 1A, which is reserved exclusively for the chief executive officer when traveling. You've been occupying the CEO's personal seat. Lydia looked down at the leather seat as if it had suddenly become molten. Everything about her situation, her assumptions, her cruelty, her public humiliation of this man, crashed down on her at once. Victor desperately tried to salvage his career. Sir, if we could speak privately, I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Darius replied. You and your crew discriminated against a passenger based on race and perceived social class. That discrimination happened to target your own chief executive officer. He gestured to the cameras still recording, but more importantly, it was captured by dozens of witnesses and broadcast live to nearly 100,000 viewers. Sophia found her voice. Mr. Montgomery, please, we can fix this. We can make this right. Darius looked at her with something that might have been pity. Miss Delgado, you threatened to have me removed in handcuffs for sitting in my own seat. How exactly do you propose to make this right? The crew had no answer. They'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, made assumptions that revealed their deepest biases, and done it all while being recorded. Officer Brooks cleared his throat. Sir, what would you like us to do about this situation? Darius considered the question around him. 200 passengers waited to see how power would be wielded when the tables turned. Officer Brooks, I'd like you and Officer Park to witness what happens next. The documentation will be important for the federal investigation. Federal investigation. The words sent a chill through everyone who heard them. Darius opened his phone again, this time to the contacts list. The screen showed names that made the crew's remaining hope evaporate. Legal Department Direct Line, Human Resources Emergency Protocol, Media Relations, Crisis Management, Board Chair, Immediate Response. Ladies and gentlemen, Darius announced to the cabin, his voice carrying the authority of ownership. I apologize for this delay. What you've witnessed today is exactly why systematic change is necessary in corporate America. He looked at Lydia, still frozen in his seat. Miss Caldwell, you have approximately 30 seconds to return to your actual assigned seat before I make the first of several phone calls. Lydia's expensive composure cracked completely. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You meant every word, Darius said quietly. The question now is what happens next? The entire cabin held its breath as justice prepared to be served. Darius pressed the first number on his phone. The call connected immediately, broadcasting on speaker for the entire cabin to hear. Marcus Montgomery's office, legal department. This is Alexandra Moreau. Alexandra, this is Darius. I'm currently on flight 447, and I need you to prepare immediate documentation for a federal discrimination case. The lawyer's voice sharpened with concern. Sir, what's the situation? I've just been discriminated against by 4 of our own crew members and a passenger. The incident was captured on multiple devices and is currently being live-streamed to over 100,000 viewers. Alexandra's silence lasted 3 seconds, an eternity in legal terms. Sir, I'll have a full legal team standing by within the hour. Are you injured? Not physically, but our company's reputation and federal compliance status are in serious jeopardy. Darius looked directly at Victor while speaking. Employee number 47,291 just threatened to have me arrested for sitting in my assigned seat. I'll need his complete employment file and termination papers prepared immediately. Victor's face went ashen. Employee number 47,291. Darius knew his employee ID from memory. Mr. Montgomery, Victor whispered desperately. Please, I have a family. I have a mortgage. I was just following what I thought was protocol. Protocol? Darius's voice remained calm but carried steel. Show me the protocol that says crew members should refuse to examine passenger boarding passes based on skin color. Victor had no answer because no such protocol existed. Alexandra, Darius continued into the phone. I also need comprehensive documentation on our current anti-discrimination policies. Clearly, they're failing if our crew can't distinguish between legitimate security concerns and racial profiling. Should I contact the Federal Aviation Administration? Yes, and the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights. They'll want to review our compliance immediately. The legal implications were mounting by the second. Federal agencies meant investigations, fines, and potential operational restrictions. Also prepare civil rights violation documentation under Title II of the Civil Rights Act, both individual and institutional liability. Darius ended the call and immediately dialed the second number, Human Resources. Marcus Montgomery's office, HR, emergency line. This is Director Lauren Whitaker. Lauren, this is Darius. I need immediate employment actions for Flight 447 crew members. The cabin was dead silent except for the sound of phones recording and the soft crying from several crew members. Brooke Callahan, employee 23,847. Full investigation into discrimination violations. 6-month unpaid suspension pending mandatory bias training completion. She must pass a psychological evaluation before reinstatement consideration. Brooke's knees buckled. 6 months without pay would mean losing her apartment, possibly her car. Colton Reeves, employee 18293. 1-year probation with mandatory weekly counseling sessions. Diversity training certification required monthly. Any future incident results in immediate termination. Colton nodded frantically, grateful to still have employment. Sophia Delgado, employee 31,456. Mandatory 100-hour bias training program, professional counseling evaluation and demotion from senior flight attendant, salary reduction of 15% for 2 years. Sophia's face crumpled. 15 years of career advancement wiped out by 10 minutes of prejudice. And Victor Langston, employee 47,291. Darius's voice carried finality. Immediate termination with cause, 0 severance, forfeiture of all benefits including pension contributions, and permanent notation preventing rehire anywhere in the aviation industry. Victor collapsed completely, sobbing in the aircraft aisle. Please, Mr. Montgomery, please don't destroy my life. I made a mistake, but I can learn. I can change. Darius looked down at him with something between pity and steel resolve. Mr. Langston, you had 8 years to learn. 8 years of mandatory bias training, diversity workshops, and customer service protocols. Instead, you chose to threaten your own CEO with arrest based on assumptions about my race and social class. He turned back to the phone. Lauren, implement immediate policy changes. Body camera requirements for all crew members effective tomorrow morning. Any passenger complaint involving potential discrimination must be recorded and reviewed by a bias response team within 24 hours. Budget allocation for the new program, ma'am? $50 million annually for the first 3 years. This systematic failure ends today. The number sent shockwaves through the listening passengers. $50 million, more money than many small companies saw in their entire existence, dedicated solely to preventing discrimination. Also establish a passenger advocate position in every hub, independent oversight with direct reporting to my office, and create an anonymous bias reporting system with real-time alerts to management. Sir, the operational changes will be significant. The operational cost of discrimination is higher. We'll also be implementing quarterly bias assessments for all customer-facing employees. Failure means immediate retraining or termination. Darius ended the HR call and turned his attention to Lydia, who was still sitting in his seat like she'd been turned to stone. Miss Caldwell, now we discuss your situation. He pulled up her LinkedIn profile on his phone, turning the screen toward the recording camera so Taylor's 150,000 livestream viewers could see it clearly. Lydia Caldwell, Senior Marketing Director at the Coca-Cola Company, Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Committee Chairwoman. Recent LinkedIn post, and I quote, "Zero tolerance for workplace discrimination. We must all do better." And the hypocrisy was so stark it was almost surreal. A woman who publicly championed inclusion had just committed one of the most blatant acts of racial discrimination many passengers had ever witnessed. Miss Caldwell, you publicly advocate for diversity while privately telling black men to get their black ass to the back of the plane. Your employer will find this interesting. Lydia's carefully constructed professional facade was disintegrating in real time. Please, I didn't mean, I'm not usually like this. You meant every word, Darius said quietly. The question is, what happens next? He pulled up his contacts again, showing her name. Coca-Cola Executive Relations Direct Line. I can make one phone call and end your career today. Your company has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, don't they? Lydia nodded miserably. Or, Darius continued, you can choose accountability over denial. You have 2 options. The entire cabin leaned forward. Justice was about to be precisely measured. Option 1. You record a public apology that will be shared across all social media platforms. You complete 200 hours of community service specifically at civil rights organizations. You undergo 6 months of professional bias counseling. You accept lifetime monitoring status on all flights, meaning every interaction you have with airline staff will be documented. Additionally, you'll speak at diversity training sessions for corporate executives, sharing exactly what you did and why it was wrong. Your story will become a case study in unconscious bias training. The requirements were comprehensive and humiliating, but not career-ending. Option 2. I file federal discrimination charges under Title II of the Civil Rights Act. You face up to $500,000 in civil penalties under Georgia's hate crime enhancement laws. You receive a lifetime ban from Delta and all partner airlines, American, United, Southwest, JetBlue, and I personally call your CEO to provide video evidence of today's incident. The second option was professional suicide and financial ruin. Darius dialed his third number. Media Relations. Darius Montgomery's office. Crisis Communications. This is Director Derek Sullivan. Derek, this is Darius. We have a major incident requiring immediate response. I was racially discriminated against by our own crew and a passenger on Flight 447. The incident is viral on social media. Sir, how viral are we talking about? Taylor held up her phone, showing the viewer counter climbing in real time. 189,000, 195,000, 203,000 people watching live. Currently over 200,000 people watching live across multiple platforms. The hashtag Delta discrimination is trending #1 on Twitter. I need a full press conference set up for 6 p.m. today. Complete transparency protocol. Sir, the stock price implications could be severe. Maybe we should consider damage control messaging first. Derek. Darius's voice carried absolute authority. We're not controlling damage. We're owning our mistakes completely and demonstrating exactly how we're fixing them. Transparency builds trust. Cover-ups destroy companies. The media director's voice was strained. Sir, the board might want to discuss strategic messaging options. I am the board, 67% majority shareholder. This is my decision and it's final. Darius looked directly into Taylor's phone camera, addressing the live stream audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen watching this stream, what you've witnessed today is exactly why systematic change is necessary in corporate America. This wasn't just about one seat on one flight. This was about the assumptions, biases, and casual cruelty that marginalized people face every single day. He gestured to the crew and Lydia. These people made judgments based on my skin color and clothing. They refused to examine evidence. They threatened me with arrest, and they did it confidently because they thought there would be no consequences. The livestream comments were flying too fast to read, but the overwhelming sentiment was clear. Justice was finally being served. Darius turned back to Lydia. Miss Caldwell, the 200,000 people watching this stream are waiting for your decision. Do you choose accountability and reform or legal consequences and career destruction? Lydia looked around the cabin desperately. 200 faces stared back at her, most showing no sympathy whatsoever. She'd earned their judgment with racist assumptions and public cruelty. I choose option 1, she whispered. The live stream audience can't hear you, Darius said firmly. Speak clearly so your choice is properly documented. I choose option 1, Lydia said loudly, tears streaming down her face. I choose to apologize publicly and complete the community service and counseling. Darius nodded to Officer Brooks. Officer, please document that Miss Caldwell has selected accountability over denial. Her public apology will be recorded and distributed across all social media platforms. He turned to the devastated crew members. As for you 4, your employment fates have been determined based on your individual actions and leadership roles in this discrimination. Victor was still collapsed on the floor, understanding that 8 years of career advancement had been destroyed by 10 minutes of biased assumptions. The systematic changes I'm implementing today will ensure this never happens again on any Delta aircraft. I guarantee it. The cabin erupted in applause. Justice had been served systematically, thoroughly, and publicly. The real work was just beginning. 20 minutes later, the aircraft had been cleared and a new crew boarded. Victor Langston walked past the windows in handcuffs, escorted by airport security toward a waiting police car. His 8-year career with Delta had ended in complete disgrace. Darius finally took his rightful seat in 1A as Lydia was relocated to 23F, middle seat economy class. The symbolic reversal wasn't lost on the passengers still filming. Ladies and gentlemen, came the captain's voice over the intercom. This is Captain Harlan. I want to personally apologize for the delay and the unacceptable behavior you witnessed today. Mr. Montgomery, it's an honor to have you aboard. Taylor's live stream had stabilized at 287,000 viewers. The comments section was a river of justice-satisfied emojis and demands for accountability across all industries. Darius pulled out his laptop and began typing. Within minutes, he drafted a company-wide email that would reach all 43,000 Delta employees before the aircraft reached cruising altitude. The subject line read, "Immediate implementation, zero-tolerance discrimination protocol." Effective immediately, Darius typed. Delta Airlines implements the most comprehensive anti-bias program in aviation history. Today's incident revealed systematic failures that end now. He outlined the new policies: the Dignity Protocol, mandatory body cameras for all customer interactions, anonymous bias reporting through mobile app with 24-hour response guarantee, independent passenger advocate in every hub, quarterly discrimination audits by third-party civil rights organizations, $50 million annual budget for bias prevention and employee training. Darius looked up from his laptop to address the cabin directly. I want everyone here to understand what just happened. This wasn't about punishment. This was about prevention. A businessman in 2C raised his hand. Mr. Montgomery, how do you ensure this cultural change actually happens? Accountability systems, Darius replied. Every employee interaction is now monitored. Every bias complaint triggers immediate investigation and every violation has real consequences. He showed his laptop screen to nearby passengers. I'm implementing the 3-strike system. First incident, mandatory retraining. Second incident, 6-month unpaid suspension. Third incident, permanent termination with industry blacklisting. Brooke, who had been quietly crying in the back galley, approached hesitantly. Mr. Montgomery, I know I don't deserve to ask, but is there any way to earn back your trust? Darius studied her for a moment. Miss Callahan, you assumed I was lying based on my appearance. You refused to examine evidence. How do you propose to earn back trust? I want to become part of the solution, she said, voice trembling. I want to help train other crew members so they never make my mistakes. That's actually not a terrible idea, Darius said thoughtfully. Personal redemption through education of others. We'll discuss that during your suspension period. Officer Brooks, still on the aircraft documenting the incident, looked up from his report. Mr. Montgomery, I've seen a lot of discrimination cases. I've never seen someone with your level of power choose education over revenge. Revenge doesn't create systematic change, Darius replied. It just creates more resentment. Education creates understanding. Understanding creates lasting transformation. Taylor held up her phone, still live streaming. Mr. Montgomery, people in the comments want to know, was this really a test? Darius smiled slightly. I conduct unannounced assessments of our customer experience regularly, but I never expected the results to be this comprehensive. He opened his calendar app showing the pre-scheduled meetings. The emergency board meeting, legal review, and press conference were already planned. I've been documenting discrimination incidents across our system for months. The revelation sent a murmur through the cabin. This hadn't been random. It had been a systematic investigation. Today's incident gave me everything I needed to justify the most aggressive anti-discrimination program in corporate history. A teenage passenger called out, "What about other airlines? Will they change too?" They'll have to, Darius replied confidently. Within 48 hours, every major airline will announce similar programs. Nobody wants to be the company that tolerates discrimination after this goes viral. His prediction proved accurate. By the time Flight 447 landed in New York, United Airlines had already issued a statement promising comprehensive bias prevention measures. American Airlines followed an hour later. Darius's phone buzzed with a text from his media director. Stock price up 3.2% after your transparency announcement. Investors love the accountability approach. The airline industry was transforming in real time. Lydia, relegated to economy class, approached Darius during beverage service. Her designer confidence had been completely stripped away. Mr. Montgomery, I need you to know I have biracial grandchildren. I never thought I was racist. I don't understand how I became that person today. Darius looked at her with something approaching sympathy. Miss Caldwell, racism isn't always conscious. Sometimes it's learned assumptions we don't even recognize. That's why the counseling requirement exists. Will you tell Coca-Cola what happened? That depends entirely on how seriously you take your rehabilitation, Darius replied. Demonstrate real change and your employer never needs to know the details. Continue the patterns that brought you here, and the video speaks for itself. The conditional mercy was more than Lydia had dared hope for. Darius returned to his laptop, drafting the press release that would reshape corporate discrimination policies nationwide. Delta Airlines announces revolutionary dignity in travel initiative following CEO discrimination incident. The statement was brutally honest about the failures while positioning Delta as the industry leader in bias prevention. Every detail of the incident would be public record, but framed as a catalyst for positive change. Officer Park finished her documentation and approached Darius. "Sir, I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. I've never seen someone turn a discrimination incident into systematic industry reform in real time." Officer Park, "Change happens when people with power choose to use it responsibly. Today, I had the power to create lasting transformation. Tomorrow, that example might inspire others to do the same." As the aircraft descended toward JFK Airport, Darius reflected on the day's events. One seat dispute had become a corporate revolution. One moment of documented bias had triggered industry-wide policy changes. His phone showed 47 missed calls from reporters, 23 interview requests, and 156 messages from civil rights organizations praising the transparency approach. The teenager, Taylor, still live streaming to over 300,000 viewers, asked the final question. "Mr. Montgomery, what do you want people to remember about today?" Darius thought carefully before responding. "I want people to remember that dignity isn't negotiable. Respect isn't earned through wealth or status. It's the birthright of every human being." He looked around the cabin at the faces still processing the dramatic transformation they'd witnessed. "And I want people to remember that real change is possible when we choose accountability over defensiveness, education over revenge, and systematic reform over individual punishment." The aircraft touched down in New York as the sun set over Manhattan. Flight 447 had become more than transportation. It had become the catalyst for a civil rights revolution in corporate America. Justice had been served systematically, comprehensively, and publicly. The real transformation was just beginning. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Darius stood in Delta's Atlanta headquarters reviewing the quarterly discrimination report. The numbers told an extraordinary story. Bias incidents down 89% across all flights. Customer satisfaction at an all-time high. Employee morale improved dramatically after the toxic culture of assumptions was systematically eliminated. The dignity protocol had become the gold standard across the aviation industry. Brooke Callahan stood at the podium in the company's training center, addressing 200 new flight attendants. Her 6-month suspension had become 6 months of intensive bias education, and now she was Delta's most effective discrimination prevention trainer. "I looked at Mr. Montgomery and saw only his clothes, his skin color, my assumptions," she told the trainees. "I refused to see his humanity. Don't make my mistake. Every passenger deserves your respect, regardless of appearance." Her personal story of failure and redemption had trained over 3,000 airline employees across the industry. Victor Langston had taken a job at a small regional airline in Montana, starting over at entry level. His termination from Delta had been covered extensively in aviation trade publications. No major airline would hire him, but he'd found purpose in a victim impact program, speaking to corporate executives about the real cost of discrimination. His message was simple: 10 minutes of bias destroyed my career. Don't let it destroy yours. Lydia Caldwell had completed her 200 hours of community service at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. The experience had fundamentally altered her worldview. She'd left Coca-Cola voluntarily to become a full-time diversity consultant, using her story of transformation to help other executives confront their unconscious biases. Her speaking fee was donated entirely to civil rights organizations. Taylor Grayson, the teenager whose livestream had captured everything, had received a full scholarship to journalism school. Her documentary about the Flight 447 incident had won 3 Student Film Awards and sparked bias prevention programs at universities nationwide. The video itself had been viewed 12.7 million times across all platforms. But the most significant change was systematic. The Montgomery Protocol, named after the incident, had been adopted by every major transportation company in America. Buses, trains, ride-sharing services, and airlines all implemented similar bias prevention measures. Congress had passed the Equal Access Transportation Act, mandating federal oversight of discrimination in public transportation. The Department of Transportation now required annual bias audits for all commercial carriers. Darius had been invited to speak at the United Nations Human Rights Council, where he presented Delta's transformation as a model for corporate accountability worldwide. "Real power," he told the assembly, "isn't about having authority over others. Real power is using your position to ensure everyone else is treated with dignity." The airline industry hadn't just changed, it had been revolutionized. Darius received daily emails from passengers sharing their own stories of discrimination, but also stories of hope. Flight crews who now went out of their way to ensure every passenger felt welcome. Gate agents who double-checked their assumptions. Captains who made personal apologies when service fell short. The culture of casual bias had been replaced by a culture of intentional inclusion. On the one-year anniversary of Flight 447, Darius returned to Seat 1A on the same route. The crew, entirely new except for Brooke, who had earned her reinstatement, treated every passenger with the same courtesy and respect. The transformation was complete, but the vigilance was permanent. Your voice matters in this fight. Have you witnessed discrimination in travel, at work, or in daily life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could prevent someone else's pain and spark the change your community needs. Tag someone who needs to see this message of hope and accountability. Hit that share button. These stories matter more than entertainment. When we speak up together, systematic change becomes inevitable. Subscribe to Black Soul Stories for more untold stories of quiet courage turning into lasting transformation. Hit the notification bell because these conversations change the world one story at a time. The question isn't whether you'll face injustice, it's how you'll respond when you do. Will you stay silent or will you become the catalyst for change? Will you accept discrimination as just how things are or will you demand better? One moment of documented courage changed an entire industry. One person's refusal to accept humiliation sparked a nationwide movement. One choice to educate rather than retaliate transformed millions of lives. You have that same power in your workplace, your community, your daily interactions. You can choose dignity over discrimination, accountability over silence, progress over prejudice. Don't just watch this story. Become part of the movement. Because when we stand together for justice, discrimination doesn't stand a chance.